So welcome to Ora Tea Talks in association with Good Magazine. I'm Good editor Carolyn Enting, and today we're here to welcome and chat to Jacqlin Richards, who is a mother, a parenting mentor, an attunement therapy specialist, and also a embodied counselling practitioner. So welcome, Jacqlin. We're really excited to have you here chatting with us today over a nice hot cup of tea, and really keen to hear more about your work as a parenting mentor and also the tools that you use to help families.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure and a real honour to be here.
So that's great. So in terms of, I guess, working, what does parenting mentoring sort of look like? And do you have tools that you use that can help families?
Yes, well, parenting mentoring it's interesting. I guess what the crux of what I do is essentially to help parents be okay with being parents, and let go of the need to get it right all the time, and let go of the perfectionism and the judgment and the guilt, and essentially let go of being a perfect parent, because I think that that's a massive piece out there that so many parents struggle with at the moment. So really helping parents realize that they're human, that they're not robots, and being okay with the way that they parent by helping them see where it comes from. So by seeing where it comes from, it can really give them a level of acceptance. And when we're okay with our parenting, it's the best platform for change. When we're no longer judging ourselves so harshly, it's the best place to be able to actually make changes from. So that's the essence of what I do in my work, is to help people see where their parenting comes from, so that they can come to a level of acceptance and stop giving themselves such a hard time about it.
That's amazing. Now, I have to, say straight up, I'm not a parent. Unfortunately, that hasn't been a path for me, and although I nearly got there once. But I have a lot of friends that are parents. Obviously, I had parents myself, and I do remember, mum or me sharing later in life about something that she'd said that kind of really stuck with me, and she couldn't even remember saying it, and then her sharing with me how she'd felt really guilty about something that had kind of happened or said, and I didn't remember it at all. So I mean, a lot of this is out of our control, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's the most interesting part about parenting is that we continue these cycles from the past, that and the way that we were parented, we just bring through into our own parenting, and often I'll say that it doesn't actually matter at all whether you're a parent or not, because you're still parenting, you're still parented. And having awareness of the cycles, that we just kind of fall into, even as adults without children, it just shows us that it's not our fault, the way that things go, the way that things play, the way that things flow, and that we all turn into our parents, essentially.
That's so true. The older I get, the more I realize this.
I know. Like I totally turned into my mother. I absolutely turned into my mother. Bless her. I love her to bits. And a lot of the ways that I turned into her weren't really authentic to me. They weren't really me. They were just me kind of repeating the patterns that were that were programmed into me as a kid. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, I'm nothing like my mother. I'm nothing like my mother, and I'm nothing like my father." And it's like, yeah, but that's because you're actually you've become the reaction to them, so you've become the opposite of them, and usually that's not really helpful either. So it's really fascinating to be in this work and to actually, I guess, open people's eyes that a lot of this we don't have control over in the beginning, because it's completely out of our awareness. It's like under the surface stuff.
That's great. So when you're working with parents, I'm imagining they must have probably a sense of relief when they have this realization that they're actually doing okay and they don't have to let go of that perfectionism.
Yeah, well, yeah, that they can let go of it. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a gift, and I think the older parents get, or the older men and women get when they have their kids, which is what's happening. People are leaving it till later in life. And I know for me that I had so much control over my life, and I was a complete perfectionist. And taking that into parenting is a recipe for disaster because kids are just they're not perfect. They're messy, they're all over the place, they're unpredictable. And, to be able to give parents the gift of, what, it's okay. It's okay what's going on. It's okay that it's messy. It's okay that you cut corners. It's okay that you're having a hard time, that it's not all roses. So, yeah, I think it's a real gift to give to parents to be able to give themselves permission, to muck it up and to get it wrong and to make mistakes, and because that is parenting.
Jaclyn, can you share your journey of parenting? I mean, and being a single mum raising 2 sons, and how did you get into doing parenting mentoring?
Yeah, well, it's not where I thought I'd be, that's for sure. It's not where I thought I'd be in terms of being in a co-parenting relationship. And I used to be a corporate architect. That was my profession previously. So, but the thing is that, I literally nosedived into this autopilot parenting, which is a lot of what I talk about in my work, which is where these old patterns just start to kick in. And as I said, I became my mother. My husband became his father, and our relationship became my parents' relationship, and it was fascinating to look back at, through hindsight glasses, which are crystal clear, obviously, but, there were so many things that came up in our relationship that I see all over the place, in terms of, we go in with these best intentions. We went in with these intentions of, that we were partners and we were 50-50, and, we were going to share the load and share the care, and, hands on mum and hands on dad, and then wham, we had a baby and we did the complete opposite. And it was fascinating to actually, to be able to look at it in hindsight, because at the time I just wasn't conscious of it. It was just this pattern that played out. And what I saw, or what I could see, what I can see now, and what I see so much out there in the world, is that I became a single mum before I even was one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I just completely pushed my husband aside. I was like, right, I'm doing this, and that was because that's what I saw my mother do. And a lot of our dads weren't as hands-on as we want our partners to be these days. And it's just a cycle, because I had no reference point of parents parenting together, because my parents split when I was very young. And my parents, my mum's parents, they were war children. So her dad was in the war, and they were raised by their mums, by the women. And it's fascinating to look back at this, because there's no judgment there, because they were just simply repeating the patterns, right? Of what they saw. So I'd never seen 2 parents parenting together. So I didn't actually know what it looked like. So when I became a parent, I just started doing it all on my own, and I put my kids, first, and kind of pushed my relationship aside, and my relationship really struggled with that, and and that's what I see out there so often, because there's so many relationships that are going like that these days, and yeah.
I hear that, from friends of mine, have had children, that, the first few years are really, really tough as well, because your life is completely changed, your sleep's disrupted, there's a lot of pressure on both parents from all angles. So in your work, do you specialise in a particular age group for children at all?
Well, the way that I like to work, the way that I approach it is to empower the parents, to empower the parents so that they can empower their children. And that goes across all age groups, So I do work with parents across all age groups, but ideally I'd love to work with parents before they even conceive, so that they're actually clearing out, the system, so to speak, and getting ready for having children. And what that means is that they can start to look at these old patterns, their own childhood upbringing, and their own childhood upbringing of their husband or their partner, and they can work out what they want to bring and what they don't want to bring, and bring that into their parenting. But having said that, a lot of parents don't realize that's even a good idea. It's just like you're just kind of going and you're winging it, and you're wearing those rosy tinted glasses, and I fully was, my glasses were so rose tinted, it was crazy. Just gonna have a bit of tea.
Yeah, that's really incredible epiphany, and having that awareness is, as you say, most of us do go through life with rose tinted glasses. It's not going to happen to me. I'm going to be the best parent, the best person.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So what's an example of, I guess, someone coming to you with an issue and you being able to help them through that?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, a lot of the ways that parents come and see me is because the behaviour of their children isn't great. Yeah. They either they have, kids that aren't listening, kids that aren't responding, kids that aren't doing what they've asked them to do, and I mean, there's no way around it. We need our kids to do certain stuff, we need our kids to get in the car, we need our kids to brush their teeth, we need our kids to get into bed at a reasonable time. A lot of parents have real struggles with that. So that's a lot of what brings parents to me. But what comes out as we work together is a lot of the underlying stuff that actually gets in the way of parents, putting in good boundaries with their kids and having good agreements with their children and trusting themselves as parents, really being able to let go of the guilt. Yeah, parent guilt is massive. And parent responsibility, I think, is another massive piece. It's like we feel so responsible for our kids' happiness and our kids' experience, and whether the siblings like each other or not, or whether everyone's having a good time. And this brings up so many other underlying things that come from our own childhood. Like keeping the peace and, making sure everything's smooth and calm, doing that is exhausting. And what it's actually not inviting our children to do is that, all emotions are okay. And most of us grew up in family environments where they weren't okay. So it's really challenging for parents out there, especially at the moment, during these times, that they these big emotions are coming up, and if it wasn't okay for them to feel it when they were kids, it's a real struggle when their own children are expressing and having these big emotions. So there's lots of pieces that actually bring parents to come and work with me, but a lot of it is that parents just aren't enjoying being parents. It's a real struggle for them, and there's no joy, there's no playfulness in their parenting, and children operate through play. So it's really hard if everything is very, very serious and intense and stressful when children want to play, because that's their language.
It's interesting what you were saying before too about the guilt. I've got friends who are parents who share with me, the fact that when they want to go and do something for themselves, they have this massive guilt around it because they then feel like they're neglecting their child or their children, and therefore they put themselves last. And would that also be fair to say that has an effect because you're suppressing your own happiness or fulfillment, that therefore that's then rolling on to how you met with your kids?
Absolutely. It's like the way that I kind of work with this is passion. You've lost your passion for life, because so many parents push a giant pause button, on themselves, and they're just doing everything for their children. And the best intentions are there, and I totally get it. But the issue is that a lot of this is coming from that reaction, of if we didn't feel like we got enough connection with our parents when we were kids. because the situation was very different back then. But what it actually and you've actually pointed it out really beautifully, is that what it actually passes on to our children is for them to put everybody else's needs ahead of themselves as well, because we're modeling that. We're actually showing them how to do it. And that's how children learn. They learn through the behavior that's modeled to them by their parents. It's almost like it doesn't matter what you say, it just matters what you do, because that's how children absorb information within the first 7 years of their life. That's when they get it all, and they don't even understand it all at the time. But they, if they are seeing you constantly putting everybody else ahead of yourself, then that's what they'll learn to do too. And it's really not healthy. And as I mentioned in the, with your last question, it actually puts a real block on parents' ability to have joy, to have joy in their lives, because it's all about the kids.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. Yeah, it really is, because all of those beautiful parents out there who are just wanting to do the best for their children, and they think that giving themselves and pushing pause on their lives and making it all about the kids is doing that. When the penny drops, and they actually realise that it's the complete opposite. Then a lot of parents start to really sort of think, okay, I really want to do this differently. I really want to show my kids that their needs are as important as anybody else's. And it brings a real equality into the family, because it's like we've shifted from, when we were kids, it was really all about the parents. The kids just kind of did what they were told, and they, were seen and not heard, and all of those sorts of things. And then there's been this big reaction where it's all about the kids now. And, neither of those two ends are very helpful. We need to find this space in the middle where everybody's needs and wants are important. Yeah. And that's where the agreements come in. Yeah.
Great. Well, you hear comments too about helicopter parents, where they're just so sort of watching every single move. And I remember when I was a child, my grandmother would apparently, she'd get worried that if I was walking along a plank of wood that was literally, that far off the ground, because she was worried I was going to fall, and, constantly hovering. And so you end up growing up and quite anxious about some things, like you're not such a daredevil because you were always told that if you fell off a 2 centimetre plank that was already on the ground, that you were going to hurt yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it instills a lot of fear and anxiety in people, from a very early age, where they just don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in themselves, and they're kind of walking around thinking that the world is unsafe. And that's another way that parents are kind of, loving their children into these beliefs that they're not safe, and letting children take risks and letting children have challenges is a massive part of their development. That, as you say, when we wrap them in cotton wool, it doesn't help them. It's the opposite of what they're trying to do. So yeah, it's a big part of it. It's a really, really big part of it. What we're doing as parents, and a lot of it, as you say, is in as we're talking about, is in reaction to the way that we were parented. And I know that my mum, her heart's in her mouth a lot of the time when I'm out with my boys with her, and they're climbing up trees and doing all sorts of things that she thinks is crazy. But I still remember the day that my first little boy started pulling himself up on the furniture, and I was kind of hovering around him going, oh, like this. And I thought, I can't do this. This, he was really little. He was walking by 9 months, and my other little one was as well. So really active, really boisterous. And I thought, I need to let them learn, by themselves, and keep them safe almost from a distance. Yeah, so it's a big part.
So, Jaclyn, do you work only with the parents, or do you ever sort of enter super nanny mode where you work with children as well, or is it just the parents?
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of parents would like that, to come in and just work with the kids. But the thing is that our kids are mirrors. They're absolutely little mirrors of ourselves. And I remember using the word barometer. Like a barometer senses the pressure in the environment, and that's what children do. They sense the pressure in the environment, and if something's making them feel uncomfortable, because they're super sensitive and intuitive, they feel everything in that, especially the first 7 years. They feel it all, and if something doesn't feel great, if there's stress or there's tension or anxiety or fear in the environment, they feel it, and they just reflect it back at us. Like they reflect it back through their behavior, and sometimes that behavior is not desirable because they're feeling so uncomfortable. But what a lot of parents don't realize is that if the environment, if their own tension, their own stress is in their own systems and in their environment, then their kids are going to be feeling it. So that's why I work with the parents, because work with the parents, the kids just shift automatically. They organically change because what the parents are doing is changing. So it's a really beautiful thing. And I think that, the first times that I actually started understanding this was I would watch my big boy and his behavior would change. And then I'd really check in with myself and go, I'm really not feeling that great, because it's so easy to override the way that we're feeling to just get on and do stuff. So watching children is actually a really, really good way to see what's going on, because they're so sensitive.
That's really interesting. And in a way, could you also use that, that learning through, your partner as well, and how you are in your world, and how people or people react to you, how you are at the office, in your relationship? I can find that fascinating. So in the recent times, obviously current times, we're all cooped up in the house with the same people, and we don't normally spend 24/7 with our partners and our families. How do we all sort of stay sane during this time? You got any tips?
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? I mean, what I'm sharing with parents out there, because I'm getting so many messages and so many calls, and from very, very stressed parents. And the biggest advice that I can give is just be gentle. Be really, really gentle. These are very different circumstances, where a lot of us are still working, and we're full-time parenting, and now we're homeschooling. These are not normal circumstances that we're in. And, we need to lower these expectations of ourselves, which is, what my work is all about, dropping the perfectionism, dropping the need to get everything right, the need to actually do everything, because we're human, and we're actually undergoing some really trying circumstances at the moment. And it's not the time to try and keep everything normal, because it's not normal. So in terms of what to do, like having really, really good communication within your families, really open and honest communication, and doing that, like we have daily meetings, we all get together in the morning and we just say, what's going on for us at the moment, and have a little flow, that works with your family. Sort of blocks of time is what's working for me. And tag teaming within the relationship, if there is a mum and a dad around, because it's super, super interesting times. And I went on the radio just recently speaking about it, because people initially were saying, it's just like the school holidays. I'm like, no, it's not, because we can't go anywhere. We can't just go to the trampoline park or, drop your kids at a mate's place. And, it's like we're here 24/7 with the kids, and there's no respite. There's no relief, there's no get out of jail free card, so to speak. So we really have to make sure that everyone in the family are getting their needs and wants met, and that's where I'm sort of talking about the meetings. It's like, what do we all need here? And I think the biggest thing that I've been giving to parents is ensure that you get some time on your own. Like, ensure it. And goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that the parents' needs are vital at the moment, because they are the ones, they're like the captains of the ship. You know, if we're all kind of, and I love this little analogy, if we're all in isolated ships, you know, because we're all kind of getting cabin fever, so it sort of fits with this analogy, and we're sailing through some pretty stormy seas at the moment, then the captains are the ones that have to hold this all together. You know, they're holding the fort, and they're running the ship. So ensuring that you get some time on your own, even if it's walking up the road, you know, even if it's in the loo for 5 minutes on your own, you know, because some of these parents out there at the moment are doing it on their own. They're sole parents, so there's no one to tag team with. So I did a little blog a little while ago, and it was called The Toilet Door, and it was kind of a bit of a jesty sort of way of saying, well, that's the boundary. You know, when mum's in the loo, she's in the loo. And, you know, going into the loo and having a few minutes to just breathe, you know, is going to be super, super important during these times, especially if you can't actually get out of, you know, get some time alone from your kids. Then those sorts of times are going to be vitally important, and reaching out to other people, is going to be hugely, hugely important. Yeah.
And I guess I saw something on the news the other day about teenagers and devices, and parents not to be worried about being on devices a lot, you know, because right now it's all different.
It is all different, and the thing is I mean, I used to get so kind of wound up about devices, and I've relaxed a lot since then. And, you know, there's a balance, and I think this is the most important thing for everyone in every situation, is doing what works for you and your family. I mean, if having your kids in front of a screen for a little bit is going to get you some time to have a cup of tea and just, you know, have some mental and emotional relief, then that's great. But if having them on too much turns, you know, their behaviour into, you know, crazy little monsters, then, you know, there's a balance there to navigate. So and I think that's a really, really good way to look at it. It's like, okay, what's working and what's not, you know, what's okay and what's not, and really, really coming into a balance of what's working in your family, you know, because a bit of extra screen time is not gonna damage your kids if it's giving you some mental health and well-being, you know, time, some self-care time. So, you know, there will be a lot of parents who will feel that relaxing, you know, their stance on that is going to support them in these times. Yeah.
That brings me to another question, sort of around your work. Is the relationship with self the most important relationship we can have?
Oh, yes. yes. And it took me a long time to get to this one. It really did. And it brings me back to that earlier question, that earlier dialogue around putting everybody else's needs ahead of my own. Yeah. I'm going to keep watching you for the tea cues, because otherwise I get dehydrated.
I know it's a cold day, so I'm really enjoying this nice hot cup. I've got nice I can't even say
fruit fusion. I've got the same one.
Ora fusion. It's
I love it.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful brew, and yeah, you're right. It's getting into that tea weather, isn't it? So yes, getting back to your question about the relationship with self. When we put everybody else's needs ahead of our own, then we're actually not looking after ourselves. And, you know, when it finally really, really clicked in for me that, you know, we can't change anybody. We can't change anyone apart from ourselves. You know, we can't. And I tried for years to change everybody around me, and it doesn't work, you know, and it just opens up resentment and blame and judgment, you know, when it's all sort of pointing the finger outwards. You know, and we're so conditioned, you know, the way that we grow up to look outside of ourselves, you know, to look outside of ourselves for love and for validation, for recognition, to be valued, but and I think a bigger part, especially in terms of parenting, is that we look outside of ourselves for the answers. I just want somebody to tell me what to do, and I know that when I first had my baby, I was reading all the books because I was like, just tell me what to do. And that's absolutely what I did when I was first a parent. But what I didn't realize is that the answers are actually here. They're here. And once I learned that, to actually go here, not here, because the mind is where all those old patterns are, all those old responses and sort of stories of the way that our parents did it, and that's the way that we should be doing it. The shoulds. I think the shoulds are stored up here. I should be doing it that way. But in here, and coming from a much more heart-centered space, which is the connection with ourselves, that's where the answers are. That's where our intuitiveness is. That's where our trust comes from. That's where our confidence is. So 100%, absolutely, the connection with self is the most important thing. And once we have that connection with ourselves, then our connection with our children is so much stronger because they feel our connection that we have with ourselves, and that it actually makes them feel safer, because we're much more grounded and centered in ourselves. We're like, I've got this. So in terms of safety for children, in terms of the connection that they grow in themselves, we're modeling it by having a strong connection with ourselves. So yeah, 100% yes.
Fantastic. So can you tell us about the inner child work that you do and how that's helped you?
Yes. I guess the way that I would answer that question is that I learned how to parent my own inner child. Yeah, I learned how to parent them, and I sort of, the way that I like to look at that is that there's kind of three aspects of ourselves. There's our adult aspect, there's our child aspect, and then there's our parent aspect. And that's earlier in the conversation where we were talking about, even if we don't have physical children of our own, we are all parenting all the time because we're parenting that smaller version of ourselves, that is still in there. It's that vulnerable inner child that as parents, that we, ones that are parents, get triggered into every time our small children actually push our buttons. They take us back to that time. They transport us back to that time in our childhood when we first ever felt that way. So in terms of how it's helped me, it's really helped me understand the dynamics within myself, and that little vulnerable child that had those experiences in those early years, especially the first 7 years, still has such an impact on what I'm doing now, on all of the relationships that I'm within, because everything that we get back then informs every single relationship that we go on to have, and if you start looking at your relationships, you can start to see the patterns. It's like, oh, essentially I've been in relationship with the same person, maybe just a couple of different versions of them. And our relationships with money, our relationships with time, all of these different relationships that we have in our lives all go back to our childhood conditioning. So that part of ourselves is still in there. And to be able to get to a place where I could actually parent that smaller version of myself with love and compassion, and hold myself in those places, then I didn't actually need anybody else to. I could do that for myself. So hugely important work in terms of, really understanding that those little vulnerable parts of ourselves are still very much part of our lives, and that the adult version and the parent version within us can hold that small child, So yeah, it's really, really vital stuff to start to understand. And it also really helps in our parenting as well, because we can see where that came from and how it's informing our parenting now.
That's fantastic. I've learned so much today, having a chat, and it's been really helpful to me too, just learning about, it is a great point to make, that we are still being informed by our inner child as an adult, and it's something we don't often think about. So thank you so much for your time, Jaclyn. It's been amazing having a lovely cup of tea with you today, and thank you for being part of Ora Tea Talks.
Yes, you're welcome. I can't believe we've got the same tea. That is hilarious. Thank you, Carolyn. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.